Message Standard Version Bible, Book of Psalms, Psalm 123. To you I lift up my eyes, O you who are enthroned in the heavens. Behold, as the eyes of servants look to the hand of their master, as the eyes of a maidservant to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God, till he has mercy upon us. Have mercy upon us, O Lord, have mercy upon us, for we have had more than enough of contempt. Our soul has had more than enough of the scorn of those who are at ease, of the contempt of the proud. Our help is in the name of the Lord, a song of ascents of David.
The gospel reading this week is from Matthew chapter 25, verses 1 through 30. It's a continuation from earlier in the chapter when Jesus is talking about the kingdom of heaven. In the second analogy, he said, the kingdom of heaven is like a man going abroad who called his servants and put his capital in their hands. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2, and to another one, each according to his capacity. Then he left the country. The man who had 5 bags went at once and employed them in business, and made a profit of 5 bags, and the man who had 2 bags made 2. But the man who had been given 1 bag of gold went and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. A long time afterwards, their master returned and proceeded to settle accounts with them. The man who had been given 5 bags of gold came and produced the 5 he had made. Master, he said, you left me with 5 bags. Look, I have made 5 more. Well done, good and faithful servant. Master, I know you to be a hard man. You reap where you have not sown. You gather where you have not scattered. So I was afraid. I went and hid your gold in the ground. Here it is. Here's what belongs to you. You lazy rascal, said the master. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered? Then you ought to have put my money on deposit, and on my return I would at least have some interest. Take the bag of gold from him, give it to the one with 10 bags. For the man who has will always be given more, till he has enough and to spare. And the man who will forfeit even what he has, fling the useless servant into the dark, the place of wailing and grinding of teeth. So ends the reading. Good morning to each of you. I'm reminded of, as I begin this experience, I'm reminded of something that happened to me recently. I have a wonderful pickup truck. It's a 2006. I call it my plow truck. And one of the things I did not do was have it undercoated. And my mechanic, when he made when I had some work done recently, he said, Thomas, we need to get the rust off that truck. And we can put an undercoating on now. Well, it was money well spent. So when I went down to pick up the truck, he said, we collected probably 2 gallons of rust from the bottom of your truck. And then we sprayed it with an undercoat. And I feel like coming into the pulpit again is like, I need to get the rust off my truck. It's been a lot of years. Last year, traveled to England to conduct a wedding service for a woman I met while I was walking the Camino de Santiago in 2015. That was nerve-wracking enough. I spent 2 days in a wonderful B&B and worked out my sermon, worked out the text of the way for the wedding service. And of course, over the years, I have been asked to do various weddings and baptisms, but I must confess that I have not preached in a lot of years. And speaking to Sharon the night that I met with you, she said something interesting. I know what the Sunday was that she spoke, and she said she couldn't imagine having to write a sermon each week. And I want to confess to you that when I graduated from seminary and took my first parish in Connecticut, I would come home exhausted, after conducting the divine worship and writing the sermon. I would have to take a nap. I was just so exhausted. Well, it's like anything in your profession, you get your feet under you and you learn how to do what you must do. And it took a while, but I got over the trepidation of having to write a sermon and hopefully do what I feel is important in a sermon. One of the scariest things about delivering a sermon, it's one of the two most feared things, unless the psychology has changed, the two most fearful moments in a person's life, or the thing, what a person fears the most. Number one is speaking in public. That continues to be the single greatest phobia. The second is going to the dentist. And I'm just fine with that. My glasses aren't fine, but I'm fine. For me, when you're in a pulpit or I'm sitting in this chair, what I hope to do is to create a dialogue. It's clear that I'm the only one speaking, and that's a monologue. But clearly my invitation in the things that I'm going to share with you today, I hope to create a dialogue that will continue in your mind after this. When I was in graduate school, we had, in our sermon preparation, we had 3 courses in speech and communication. We learned how to conduct an order of business with Robert's Rules of Order, and among other things, we were videotaped. Now, mind you, this is 1972. The professor was a professor from USC, brilliant PhD in speech and communication. We had the latest technology. We actually had video cameras in our classroom. There were about 15 of us students. And we would mimic just being, we would have to get there was a stage. And we had to get on the stage, and we would videotape and subsequently critiqued by my colleagues in the classroom. And it was very educational and terrifying. We had, in the course of 2 semesters, I wrote 6 sermons, all ably critiqued by my colleagues, as I was able to. By the time 2 semesters went by, I preached 6 sermons, and that was true of the others in the class, and subsequently critiqued by the professor, by each other, by peer critique. And one of the things we had to do in the second semester, there's a period in 19th century America, it's called the burned over period. It's a period in 19th century where tremendous religious revivalism was going on. You know, these tent meetings and these traveling preachers and these evangelists and fundamentalists were raging and preaching. That's why it's called the burned over period, because the sermons were characterized by hell, fire, and brimstone. So they called it the burned over period because it was terrifying and a rain of it was that kind of a time, and there were many of these sermons recorded, and they were in our library. And one of the things we had to do, we had to preach one of those sermons. Now, I had to sound like one of these televangelists. You can see them on television in any Sunday, even today, and I had to do that. I'm no actor, but we each had to do it, and you sort of get over yourself, but you must find your own voice in the pulpit. I have to tell you, getting ready for today, I went on to YouTube and listened to Dr. Martin Luther King deliver "I Have a Dream." That is just so inspiring. Now, just listening to the contents, but his delivery is overwhelmingly communicative, powerful. The way he speaks, the English that he uses, the words that he uses, the manner that he uses, it's inspirational. Now, I feel like that moment in vice presidential history, when Vice President Lloyd Bentsen, the 1968 debate between the presidential elections, at one point, Quayle refers to Jack Kennedy. And Bentsen comes up and says, "Senator, you ain't no Jack Kennedy." And that brings down in American politics, when you want to dress someone down, as they're not really up to, you say, "You're no Jack Kennedy." So I just want to add to you, I am no Martin Luther King. I'll do my best to move and inspire you, but I'm no Martin Luther King. I want to tell you a story it's in the Talmud. So let me tell you about the Talmud. The Talmud is the central text of Rabbinic Judaism and the primary source of Jewish religious law and Jewish theology. Until the advent of modernity, in nearly all Jewish communities, the Talmud was the centerpiece of Jewish cultural life and was fundamental to, quote, all Jewish thought and aspirations, serving also as the guide for daily life. The Talmud refers to a collection of writings named specifically in two different areas of the Jewish faith. The Talmud has two components, and it has over 63 tractates. That's 2,700 double-sided folios. It contains the teachings and opinions of literally thousands of rabbis dating from the Common Era through the 5th century. They write on a variety of subjects: Jewish ethics, philosophy, customs, history, folklore, and many other topics. The Talmud is the basis for all the codes of Jewish law and is widely quoted in rabbinic literature. I want to tell you a story from the Talmud. Now that you know what the Talmud is, you'll be able to get an A+. If someone asks you what the Talmud was in your next trivia contest. There's a wonderful story from the Talmud about a very wealthy woman who dies. And upon her death, she's lived in a very luxurious way with no material worries at all. She dies and she's met by an angel. And the angel brings her on this long journey, and suddenly she sees she's coming to what looks like a heavenly city. They get to what she now can see is probably the center of that heavenly city, because they pass one mansion after another, after another, after another. But the journey goes on. There was no intersection in the heavenly city, just now she's in the suburbs. Now she's leaving the center of town. And they come across a small little cabin. And the angel says, now she's assured that one of these mansions would be her eternal reward. But now the angel stops at this little cabin. And the angel says, "This is your house," said the conducting angel. "What?" said the woman. "That? I cannot live in that place. There must be some mistake." "There is no mistake," said the angel, checking the name and address. Note says, "This is all you could build. This is all we could build with the materials you sent up." All they could build with materials they sent up. She sent up. I believe in what's called the time-life theory of education. We start learning formally, some of us with the hands of our parents, the little board books. Of course, we continue in some formal way through primary, secondary, for some of us, college and graduate school. At some point, the degrees or those moments, those classic moments, are over. But I hope we all can agree with my feeling is that we live, that I adopt a time-life theory of education. Maybe the formal part of it ceases, but the learning truly goes on day after day after day. Or at least that's the hope. Aristotle described education as the great Greek philosopher, and described education very simply. Education is nothing more than a series of opening doors, but opening doors exponentially. 2 squared is 4, 4 squared. As eventually you see, as we process, learning begets learning begets learning. It's never over. I once was at a funeral service, and I'll never forget this conversation I had with this woman talking about the death of this mother. And she made a comment that I'll never forget, talking about parenting. She said, "Parenting, oh yeah, it's over when you close your eyes for the last time." it's really something to think about that. I have grown children in their 30s, and I have daughters in their 20s. And I know parenting will be until I close my eyes for the last time. And I'd like to use that analogy for us spiritually. The people in the burned over period and those evangelists were sure that they had the answers. They had the fundamentals. That's why they were called fundamentalists. There were certain fundamentals that guaranteed your salvation, that guaranteed your knowledge of spirituality, guaranteed your mansion, your heavenly mansion. My philosophy of education is time life. My philosophy of spirituality and theology is the same. It's ongoing. I don't have answers, but what I do have are searing questions. The questions are really what's important. The answers come and go. And for some, the answers are of total assurance. I'm never that totally sure of anything. Things change. I thought when I took physics, I knew what an atom was. Well, in the course of chemistry, I mean, now they're talking about quarks. They're talking about matter between. I mean, it's astounding what we now know. There's no simple neutron and a proton. Those answers were correct, but there's so much more to that experience. And I like to think that we have certain talents and certain gifts. And we're on this journey. And it's not over till we close our eyes for the last time. And I hope it's going to be a long time before I close those eyes. And I'm sure you do too. The journey is the same for me spiritually. And I hope that we are like those servants with the 5 bags of gold and the 2 bags of gold. And we never are seen as the person who dug a hole and buried his gold. It's our task as Christians to invest in those things that make life better, make it richer, make it more amenable, make it kinder, make it a gentler place. We know all the mandates. We know all that Christ commands us to do. And they're wonderful commandments. And I hope that we never chased out. None of us are ever chased out to that place. It's pretty awful. The end of that story is not a pleasant story. I don't want to be thrown anywhere. I want to be welcomed. There's a wonderful, I don't know just where it is at the base of Mount Everest, but there's an epithet there to two men at one point died climbing Mount Everest. We know many have done that. And their bodies were subsequently found. And someone put in an epithet where they found the bodies, and they said, they died climbing. Now I hope that is the epithet on my gravestone. He died climbing. We fall many times, but I get up and I keep climbing. And I hope that we can all be like those climbers. We did not stop climbing, and we are going to send up a lot of building materials. Amen. It's certainly not missed on anyone that we are in extraordinary times. And it's not missed on anyone that I'm beginning a pastoral relationship with people I don't know. That's extremely difficult for me. We'll do our best. We'll just do our best. I have to tell you that midweek, I was pacing and pacing and pacing. And I honestly said, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know these folks. How can I preach to them? I can preach to Kathy all day. My partner will listen to me. And now maybe you may meet Amy, who's giving us some technical assistance. This is a grand experience, a grand experiment, what we're all doing. And I called Kathy and I spoke to each other. And I said, Kathy, I said, I'm thinking of just jumping ship. How on earth can I do this? And she then told me she came home with a camera. She started crying. And Ken looked at her and said, Kathy, what are you crying about? She said, I don't know if I can do this. I said, we laughed. We both. I said, well, Kathy, if we jump ship, we're going to go together. And hopefully we'll stay on that ship. And this ship is now sailing in some very turbulent times. The pandemic is on the rise, sadly, even to hitting on North Country in New Hampshire. Schools are closing. We're living in unbelievably difficult times. Economically, terrible. Socially, the religious, cultural racism is rampant. Hopefully, we will be that light in the world, because the world sorely needs as much lightness as we can all give. So we end this service, and I pray that you go and be a light to the world.